Sauron. His name echoes through Middle-earth as a symbol of fear and domination. He was the shadow that remained when Morgoth fell. But Sauron had not always walked in darkness. Once he was one of the ancient spirits who served the divine powers of the world, a Maia, called to serve the world's making and guard its order from the first stirrings of chaos. Though born of pure flame and purpose, he was not forged for evil. In the earliest days, when the world was still unshaped song and trembling light, he was known by another name, Mairon, the Admirable. In those first ages he was admirable, precise of thought, flawless in craft, drawn to order as a moth is drawn to flame. Among the Maiar he was counted gifted beyond measure, and his works in the service of Aule the smith shone with clarity and beauty. Mairon loved order above all things. He believed that weakness and confusion were flaws to be removed, that all powers and peoples should be guided, directed, ruled. He yearned for a world where every stone, every star, every living creature moved according to perfect design. And this desire, innocent at first, was what made him vulnerable. Melkor's whisper found him where he was strongest, in his craving for perfection. It spoke not of ruin, but of ultimate order, not of destruction, but of design, not of rebellion, but of correction. At first, Mairon resisted. He was no fool, and he knew the name of Melkor and the shadow that followed it. But the whisper did not sound like madness. It sounded like reason. Why tolerate weakness? Why endure imperfection? Why allow many wills to pull in different directions when one will, strong and unwavering, could command all? The more Melkor spoke, the more the idea took root. And then came the moment where thought hardened into choice. Mairon listened. Step by step, choice by choice, he turned from the patient labor of Aule and bound himself to the purpose of Morgoth. And so, Mairon became Sauron, the servant of the Dark Lord. Even under his new master's shadow, he stayed quiet, precise, and unsettlingly calm. Unlike Morgoth, whose malice was loud as thunder, Sauron's darkness was quiet, a beautiful flame burning too hot, too pure, consuming everything it touched. He entered the dark strongholds of Utumno and later Angband, where he beheld the legions of twisted creatures, corrupted spirits, beasts of flame and shadow, the first breeds of orcs and worse. Where others might have felt horror, Mairon saw potential, raw power waiting for discipline. He brought structure where chaos reigned. He forged weapons, rebuilt fortresses, devised engines of war. He learned the darker arts, domination of will, deceit, the binding of spirits into service. Melkor recognized his value, and in the authority the Dark Lord granted, Mairon found what he had always craved, the power to bend many wills into one. Thus, the fall of the Admirable became complete, not in an instant, but by slow, deliberate surrender until he was bound wholly to the will of Morgoth. Through the wars of the First Age, Sauron grew into one of Morgoth's greatest captains, Lord of werewolves, keeper of dark citadels, a terror in open war and hidden deceit. But when Angband fell and Morgoth was cast into the void, Sauron did not fall with him. When the War of Wrath ended, it did not cleanse him. It freed him. No longer held beneath another's shadow, he rose from ruin with renewed resolve. The shadow that remained when Morgoth fell did not fade. It took shape, refined and terrible, the abhorred, heir to his master's darkness, and the greatest enemy Middle-earth would face through 3 ages of the world. When the First Age ended in ruin and fire, and Morgoth was cast out beyond the walls of the world, many believed that the greatest evil had been destroyed forever. The vast fortress of Angband was broken, its pits filled, its fires quenched. The hosts of the West returned in victory across the sea. But not all of Morgoth's servants were taken or slain. Among those who escaped judgment was Sauron. In the hidden places of Middle-earth, he cast aside the shape of a captain of war and cloaked himself in secrecy. For a time, he vanished from the knowledge of elves and men. The world began to heal, kingdoms were founded, and the Second Age unfolded in growing peace. Yet Sauron had not repented. He feared the Valar and the memory of their wrath, but he did not abandon his purpose. If anything, Morgoth's fall taught him a hard lesson. Wild ruin was not enough. To dominate the world, one needed patience, deceit, and a different kind of strength. He would not be merely a lieutenant again. He would be lord in his own right. But to rule Middle-earth, he would need more than armies of orcs and beasts. He would need to enslave the wills of the mighty. And so Sauron turned his thought to the greatest of the peoples of that age, the elves. In the fair lands of Eregion, near the dwarven kingdom of Khazad-dûm, dwelt the Gwaith y Myrdain, the people of the jewelsmiths. Among them, none were greater than Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor, in whose blood the fire of craft burned bright. They loved making for its own sake, rings, jewels, works of subtle power. They were eager, curious, and ambitious. To such hearts a certain stranger came, not as a dark lord crowned with iron, nor as a beast of shadow and flame, but in a form fair to behold, clad in wisdom, gentle in counsel. He called himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He spoke not with threats, but with promises. He told them that Middle-earth need not fade, that beauty need not be lost, that what time wore down could be preserved. He offered knowledge, secrets of craft beyond what even Celebrimbor knew. He spoke as one who understood the mind of Aule, for in truth he once had. Many among the elves of Eregion welcomed him. They saw in Annatar a teacher, a friend, a guide to greater works. But far away in Lindon, the High King Gil-galad and the Lord Elrond did not trust this stranger. They listened to his words and felt in them a hidden shadow. They rejected him, and would not suffer him to dwell among their people. So Sauron turned instead to those who desired power for what they believed were noble ends. In the workshops of Eregion, side by side with the elven smiths, Annatar labored. He showed them how to bind power into metal, how to make objects that could preserve beauty, strengthen realms, and heal what was marred. Under his guidance, the elves forged rings of power. In time, many rings were made, first lesser, then greater. Annatar's counsel helped them refine their art, until at last 3 rings were wrought without his direct touch. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, the 3 rings of the elves. These were the fairest and most potent of their works, made to preserve and protect, to strengthen what was good, to keep decay and fading at bay. Celebrimbor did not reveal all the secrets of these 3 even to Annatar. Yet it was from the knowledge that Sauron had given them that the forging of all the great rings became possible. He had taught them how to channel power, how to anchor it in precious metal, how to make the wearer a little mightier, a little more enduring, a little more fixed in the pattern of the world. The elves believed these rings would help them heal Middle-earth, to hold back the long, slow loss that touched all created things. But in Sauron's mind, there was already another design. While Eregion rang with the sound of hammers and joy, Sauron returned in secret to the land he had chosen for his dominion, the dark, encircled realm of Mordor. There, in the shadow of Orodruin, the Fire Mountain, he began a work no elf had seen. In the heart of that mountain, where the heat could consume all things, Sauron poured out a great part of his own power. He did not simply forge a ring as the elves had done. He made an extension of his very will. Upon the gold he set a purpose, to rule all other rings of power, and through them, the minds and hearts of those who wore them. While he labored, he wove into it words of command, in the tongue of Mordor that none yet knew. When the forging was complete, Sauron took the ring and placed it upon his finger. In that moment, his power reached out. He sought to enter the rings that the elves had made, to bind them, to draw their bearers under his dominion. But the elves were not blindly unaware. They were mighty in spirit and keen of mind. They felt the sudden weight of his will. In an instant, they understood who Annatar truly was. Their hearts filled with dread and wrath. They saw that he had not come as a friend, but as a deceiver. And so, the elves took off their rings. The 3, which Sauron had never touched, he could not seize or control. But the others, the rings made under his guidance, remained bound to the power of the One. Sauron's plan had been wounded, but not broken. Enraged at their defiance, he cast aside all fair semblance and revealed himself as he truly was. A tyrant,
a Dark Lord. Then began war. Sauron gathered his forces in Mordor, orcs, trolls, men already corrupted by his promises, and creatures of shadow. With the One Ring upon his hand, he marched west. His armies fell upon Eregion in ruin. The land of the jewelsmiths burned. Celebrimbor was taken and tormented. Some say he would not reveal the location of the three, and so he was slain.
The forges were seized, the works scattered or stolen. From this plunder, Sauron took many rings into his own hand. These he would later give to others, to kings of men and lords of the dwarves, promising power, while in secret planting chains. But the 3 rings of the elves were hidden. One would go to Gil-galad, High King in Lindon. One would be borne by Galadriel, Lady of the Golden Wood, and one would later come to Círdan and, in time, to another bearer. So it was that even in Sauron's great design there remained a flaw. Yet for the moment his strength grew. With the One Ring he commanded vast armies, he overran great portions of Middle-earth, laid waste to Eregion, and came near to crushing all resistance in the west. The forging of the One Ring had bound a great part of his essence to that small circlet of gold. So long as it endured, his power would be vast. But in that act lay also the seed of his eventual ruin. He could not yet see it. He believed he had crafted the perfect instrument, a tool that would bring all free wills under his own. The elves, however, understood. So long as the One Ring existed, Sauron's shadow would remain tied to the world. And in ages to come, that small ring would pass from hand to hand, until at last it decided the fate of the very Dark Lord who had made it. In the heart of the Second Age, after the ruin of Eregion and the forging of the One Ring, Sauron's power reached far across Middle-earth. From Mordor, where Barad-dûr rose black against the sky, his armies marched over wide lands. Many realms of men in the east and south bowed to him in fear, and the free peoples were driven back, outnumbered and hard-pressed. Yet there was one power that even Sauron did not yet dare to challenge directly, the kingdom of Númenor. Númenor was a mighty island kingdom far out in the Western Sea, a gift from the Valar to those men who had fought against Morgoth in the First Age. Its people were the Dúnedain, the Edain of old, blessed with long life, great wisdom, and strength of body and mind. Their ships were the greatest in the world. Their kings ruled over a realm of tall cities, white towers, and deep harbors. At first, they were friends to the Eldar and loyal to the Valar. They sailed to Middle-earth to teach and to guide, and many there were glad of their coming. But as centuries passed, a shadow grew in their hearts. Though they lived long, they still died. And death, even when it came at the end of many years, became bitter to them. They began to envy the immortal elves. They questioned the ban of the Valar that forbade them to sail west to Aman, the undying lands. With envy came pride. With pride came resentment. And in the east, Sauron watched. He knew that he could not yet contend with Númenor's full might, but he also knew that great strength could be turned by its own pride. In time, the kings of Númenor grew more haughty. They established colonies along the coasts of Middle-earth, and some among them began to rule the lesser men with harshness and greed. Sauron's power in the east clashed with Númenorian might in the west. Once, he might have sought open victory by strength of arms. Now, he had a subtler plan. When Ar-Pharazôn, last and proudest of the kings of Númenor, came to the throne, he heard tales of Sauron's dominion in Middle-earth. It was said that Sauron called himself King of Men. This title Ar-Pharazôn could not endure. In his pride, he gathered the greatest fleet that Númenor had ever seen, ships beyond counting, sails like clouds upon the sea, armies armed in gold and steel, their banners bright as flame. They landed in Middle-earth with a force so overwhelming that Sauron's servants quailed before them. The mountains shook with the marching of their hosts. The hearts of men who had bowed to Sauron turned with fear and wonder to the might of Númenor. Sauron looked upon that power and understood a simple truth. He could not defeat it by war, so he chose another path. When Ar-Pharazôn's army approached Mordor, they expected a long and terrible campaign. Instead, their enemy left his fortress. Sauron came down from Barad-dûr of his own will, clad in a fair and noble form, a visage of dignity and wisdom, no longer the monstrous warlord of old. He laid aside his weapons,
came unarmed before the king and surrendered. To the Númenóreans, it seemed a triumph beyond measure. Here was the great enemy of the West, brought low without battle. They bound him, not in chains of iron, for none could truly hold him so, but as a prisoner to be taken home in glory. Ar-Pharazôn ordered that Sauron be carried back alive to Númenor, to stand as proof of the island's supremacy. Sauron went willingly, for he knew that in the heart of Númenor lay a prize greater than any fortress, the soul of a proud kingdom ripe for corruption.
In the beginning, Sauron was closely watched. He was guarded, contained, spoken of as a captive. But his greatest weapon was not his hand, nor his armies, but his voice. He was subtle in speech, deep in knowledge, and he understood the fears and desires of men. Slowly, he gained the ear of those around the king. He spoke to them of power, of greatness, of the fleeting nature of life. He flattered Númenor, calling it the mightiest of mortal realms, the rightful master of Middle-earth. He agreed with their grievances. He sympathized with their resentment of death. Why, he would ask softly, should you, whose deeds outshine those of lesser men, be denied the undying lands? Why, he whispered, should the elves and the Valar enjoy immortality, while you, the kings of men, must wither and pass? These words found ready soil in the heart of Ar-Pharazôn. The king desired to be not only mightiest among men, but to escape the doom of mortality. In time, Sauron was released from his bonds. He rose from captive to counselor, then from counselor to chief advisor. At last, his voice was the one the king heeded most. As Sauron's influence grew, the old friendship with the Eldar was cast aside. The faithful few who still honored the Valar and remembered the West were scorned and persecuted. Sauron taught the king and his court a new lie, that Melkor, whom the Valar called Morgoth, was not the great enemy of the world, but its true lord. He said that Melkor alone had the power to give men what the Valar denied them, freedom from death. At Sauron's urging, a great temple was built in Númenor, with a high, dreadful dome, its fires ever burning. There, in the name of Melkor, dark rites were performed. Smoke rose continually to the sky. Some say that within those fires, horrors beyond words were done. Sacrifices of beasts, of enemies, and in time, of men. The land itself seemed to grow heavier with shadow. The fair trees were cut down, burned to feed the great altar's flame. Those who remained true to the Valar and to Ilúvatar were driven into hiding, praying in secret, waiting in fear. Sauron stood at the center of this darkness, no longer a prisoner, but high priest of a false god and chief corrupter of Númenor's heart. He promised Ar-Pharazôn that if he would but dare to strike against the West, to defy the ban and set foot in Aman, he could seize immortality himself. At last, the king resolved to challenge even the Valar. He commanded that a host be gathered greater than any before. Ships without number were built, their prows armed for war. Armies in shining mail filled the harbors, awaiting the king's will. With Sauron's words burning in his mind, Ar-Pharazôn set forth to claim what had been forbidden. The vast armada sailed westward, toward the undying lands. It is said that when his feet set upon the shores of Aman, when a mortal king dared to march against the Blessed Realm, the Valar laid down their guardianship and called upon Ilúvatar himself. Then the world was changed. The fair land of Númenor, once lifted high above the waves, was seized by a great convulsion. The sea rose in fury. The island was swallowed whole. Its cities were broken. Its fields sank beneath the deep. Its people, save for a small remnant of the faithful, were lost. This was the downfall of Númenor, the Akallabeth, the great ruin brought about by pride and by Sauron's deceit. When Númenor fell, Sauron was there upon the island, rejoicing in the ruin he had wrought. But though his spirit was great and terrible, he was yet bound to a bodily form. In that cataclysm, his flesh was destroyed. He was swept away in the ruin of the kingdom he had corrupted. Yet he did not cease to be. His spirit fled the tumbling deeps, dark and wrathful, and returned to Middle-earth. But he had paid a heavy price. Never again could he take a fair and pleasing form. His ability to deceive by beauty was gone. Henceforth,
Those who perceived him would know him as a power of shadow, clad in might and terror, but never in true fairness. Returning to Mordor, he found that his enemies were not yet broken. From the wreck of Númenor, a remnant of the faithful had escaped, led by Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion. They founded new kingdoms in Middle-earth, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. These realms stood between Sauron and his dominion over the west. Hatred for the line of Númenor burned in him. He rebuilt his strength, raised again the power of Mordor, and from the black foundations of Barad-dûr he prepared for war. In the downfall of Númenor, Sauron had lost his body and the mask of Anatar, but he had gained something he desired more. A world sundered, Valinor removed beyond the reach of men, and Middle-earth left to him and to those who would oppose him alone.
At last, he struck. Sauron's forces fell upon Gondor with great might. He assailed Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, on the very borders of Mordor. The city was captured, its white tree destroyed, and it became a citadel of terror in the hands of his servants. From then on, it was called Minas Morgul, the Tower of Dark Sorcery. The power of Sauron pressed hard upon the line of the Anduin. Many believed that the days of the Dunedain were numbered, but the west was not yet broken. In the north, the High King of the Elves, Gil-galad of Lindon, saw that Sauron's rise threatened all of Middle-earth. In the south, Elendil, High King of the Dunedain in exile, stood firm in Arnor, while his sons, Isildur and Anarion, ruled in Gondor. Recognizing that neither elves nor men could face Sauron alone, they formed a great union, the last alliance of elves and men. From Lindon, from Rivendell, from Lothlorien and the Grey Havens, the elves gathered their hosts. From Arnor and Gondor, from the strongholds of the Dunedain, the men mustered their strength. They met upon the plains of Eregion, and there, beneath the shadow of the misty mountains, they swore oaths and raised their banners. Gil-galad and Elendil led the alliance together, two great kings standing side by side. Their armies marched east, across rivers and mountains, driving Sauron's forces back toward Mordor. They won victory in the great battle of Dagorlad, fought before the Black Gate. The marshes that followed would remain haunted by the dead of that war. At last, they laid siege to Barad-dûr itself. For 7 years, the siege endured. The armies of the Alliance camped before Mordor's walls, their strength tested by hunger, weariness, and unceasing war. Within Barad-dûr, Sauron watched and waited. He still possessed the One Ring. So long as it remained upon his hand, his power was immense. At last, he chose to come forth. Clad in black armor, vast and terrible, Sauron emerged from his fortress to strike at the leaders of the Alliance. Upon the slopes of Orodruin, the Fire Mountain, he faced Gil-galad and Elendil in single combat. The exact manner of that battle is lost to history, but it is told that both kings were slain in that struggle, their bodies broken by the might of Sauron. Yet they did not fall in vain, for as Elendil was struck down, his sword Narsil was shattered beneath him. His son Isildur came to his side, and with the hilt shard of Narsil he struck a single, fateful blow. He cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. In that instant, Sauron's bodily form was destroyed. His great shape collapsed, his power shivered and dispersed. The armies of Mordor were thrown into confusion, leaderless and broken. The siege ended in victory. But the war was not truly finished. Standing over the fallen armor of the Dark Lord, Isildur took up the ring. Those who understood its nature urged him to destroy it. The ring could have been cast then and there into the fires of Mount Doom, unmade in the place where it was first forged. Had that been done, Sauron's spirit would have been diminished beyond any hope of recovery. But the ring did not sleep. It called to Isildur's heart, whispering of right and reward. He saw it not as a thing of corruption, but as a weregild, a rightful payment for his father and brother, for the suffering of his people. I will have this ring, he said, as weregild for the death of my father and my brother. and so he kept it. From that moment, the fate of Sauron and the fate of the ring were bound together. Sauron's spirit was cast down, but not destroyed. He became a shadow, a will without form, drifting in the darkness. He could no longer appear as a great lord of war, but so long as the ring endured, his being was secretly rooted in the world. In the early years of the Third Age, the ring betrayed Isildur. As he journeyed north to the realm of Arnor, he was ambushed by orcs near the Gladden Fields. Seeking to escape, Isildur put on the ring and vanished from sight. But the ring slipped from his finger into the river Anduin. Isildur was seen by his enemies, struck down with arrows, and slain. The ring was lost. For long centuries, it lay hidden in the dark depths of the river. Sauron, stripped of form, lurked in the shadows of Middle-earth. He was weak, unable to command armies or build fortresses as he had before. The wise believed he had been utterly broken, or that he had fled beyond the reach of the world. But in truth, his will endured. Far in the dark places of the east, his malice gathered slowly, like a storm forming behind distant mountains. At last, in the Third Age, a new shadow appeared in the great forest then called Greenwood the Great. Whispers spread of a presence dwelling in the old hill fortress of Dol Guldur. He was called simply the Necromancer. The wise among the elves and among the Istari, the wizards sent from the west, watched and pondered. Some feared that this shadow was no mere lesser spirit, but Sauron himself, slowly gathering strength. Through long years, the Necromancer sent out dark things, drove beasts and men to madness, and spread fear through the wild. Under his influence, Greenwood grew sickened and dim. It became known as Mirkwood, the Forest of Great Fear. At first, Sauron did not show himself openly. He tested. He gathered information. He sought the fate of the one ring that had been lost. The wise debated. Only after many years did they come in force to Dol Guldur. By the counsel of Gandalf and others of the White Council, the Necromancer's stronghold was assailed. Sauron, not yet at the full of his strength, withdrew. He fled again to Mordor. There, in secret, he rebuilt his citadel, and in time declared himself openly once more. The Dark Lord had returned. Even without the ring, Sauron's power was great. He raised new walls and towers in Mordor, filled its plains with armies, and bent many nations of men to his will. But he lacked what he had poured so much of himself into, the One Ring. He searched for it unceasingly. At last, after ages in the depths of the Anduin, the ring found a new bearer, a creature twisted by time, once a hobbit-like being, now known as Gollum. For long years it consumed him, stretching his life unnaturally, binding his will and shrinking his world to the single thought of, my precious. In time, the ring betrayed even him. It slipped from his fingers in the dark tunnels beneath the misty mountains, and was found by one who did not seek it, Bilbo Baggins of the Shire. From that moment, the fate of the great would rest in the hands of the small. Sauron did not yet know where the ring lay, but he felt it stirring. His eye turned more and more to the west. He stirred the riders of Dol Guldur, the Nazgul, ring-wraiths enslaved by the 9 rings he had given to mortal kings. They searched, hunted, pressed ever closer to the lands of the Dunedain in exile and to the quiet Shire where the ring had come to rest. When Frodo Baggins, heir to Bilbo, took the ring from the Shire, a chain of events began that would decide Sauron's final fate. Guided by Gandalf, protected by the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo set out not to wield the ring, but to destroy it. Sauron believed that any who possessed the ring would seek to use it against him. He could not imagine that one would try to cast aside such power. This was his blind spot. As his armies marched against Gondor and Rohan, as the fields of Pelennor shook beneath the hooves of war and the wings of fell beasts, he watched for a rival who would seize the ring and reveal themselves as a new claimant to mastery. Instead, a small company moved in secret through the wastes of Mordor. While the captains of the West drew Sauron's gaze to the Black Gate with a final, desperate assault, Frodo and Sam climbed the slopes of Mount Doom. At the very brink of the fire where the ring was made, Frodo at last could not cast it away. The ring claimed him. He put it on. For an instant, Sauron felt its presence with perfect clarity. He understood with terrible suddenness what his enemies had intended. In a flash, he realized they had come not to wield the ring, but to destroy it. He reached out in panic and fury, sending the Nazgul in a desperate rush toward the mountain. But it was too late. Gollum, driven by obsession, struggled with Frodo, took the ring, and in his victory fell with it into the fire. The ring, which held so much of Sauron's own essence, was unmade. In that moment, the foundations of Barad-dûr shook. The great tower cracked, splintered, and fell. The Black Gate was thrown down. The armies of Mordor wavered, broke, and fled or were swallowed by the ruin. Sauron's power, bound for so long to the ring, was suddenly shattered. His spirit rose in a vast, silent cry, a shadow spreading like smoke across the sky. But it could not take shape. There was no longer any anchor in the world strong enough to hold him. He was blown away, a formless darkness, never again able to grow into a will that could command. So ended the long story of Sauron. Born as Mairon the Admirable, a Maia of great promise in the house of Aula, fallen into the service of Morgoth, risen as Anatar, deceiver of elves and maker of the One Ring, corrupter of Númenor, lord of Mordor, and great enemy of the free peoples of Middle-earth. In the end, his greatest work, the ring he forged to enslave all others, became the instrument of his final ruin. If you wish to explore even deeper into the ancient history of Arda, go watch our next video, The Origins of the Dwarves, where the first 7 fathers awaken in the deep places of the world. Thank you for watching, and if you want more tales from Middle-earth, join us and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.